So today we will be exploring the story of Dotun Eyinade, who is the CEO and co-founder of Roving Heights. Roving Heights is a leading Nigerian bookstore and literary brand co-founded in 2016 by the Eyinade family. Roving Heights began as a dining room side hustle in Agege, Lagos. It combines physical stores and a strong e-commerce platform to make quality, authentic books accessible across Nigeria and beyond. Known for supporting local and self-published authors, Roving Heights fosters a vibrant book culture through curated literacy experiences, exclusive distribution deals, and active community engagement. It has grown organically to one of Nigeria's most recognizable book retailers, celebrated for excellent customer service and a passion for African literature. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Deji. It's really nice to be on the podcast. Thank you for having me.
For many people that do not know, my book Scaling for Success actually happens to be distributed live by Rovenites. Rovenites is one of the largest distributors of my book. In fact, the primary distributor. And without shooting points, and I'm not saying it because Dr. is here, I think I've been pleased by Rovenites services. And this is me having compared with one or two others. So this is not just me doing the
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words.
So let's take you back into many years back, way back, when you were a kid and you were growing up in Agege. What exactly was your growing up like, and what exactly inspired what you're doing today from the experiences you had growing up?
Thank you, Deji. Yeah, so I was born in Agege. I was the first child of two teachers. Both my parents were teachers. So they taught in, elementary school. And I've got two sisters. And one of my sisters, is my co-founder. I grew up, the early years was during the days of military dictatorship, right? So it was at the time where I was born, I was, for the first part of my years, the president was a military dictator. That was Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. And when I started to become more aware of things around me, those years were sort of tough, to be quite honest. Like because my parents were a civil servant, it was during the SAP years, structural adjustment program, where, things were pretty tough. And then those years were characterized by lots of strikes, right? Civil servants were always down tooling. And then, so my parents, they made the serious investment in, primary education. So we went to a private, primary school. It was not a public school. And it was very tough because amidst, periodic strikes, so there will be periods where they will be defaulting in bills that they would have to persuade or make a strong case for us not to be kicked out of school. But one of the things that characterized those years for me was just, books, so I found a lot of solace in books those years when I was 7, 8. So the fact that we had books at home and we had a few neighbors with whom we could swap books. And so for you to be my friend, back then we had to have this common interest in books because I would read and then we would swap. And then, so you would brag about how many of the, say, Peseta series, you'd read. So you would have people who would talk about, so they read everything in the Peseta series, and then you'd be longing to get them to, borrow you some so that you could read as well. Reading for me helped me stay out of trouble. Agege is a very tough neighborhood, right? I still think it's a very tough place to raise a child. They're fairly decent parts of the town, but where I grew up wasn't it was a very, very rough street. So you were either up at home reading a book or you out on the street playing football where you could be bullied by tougher kids. So reading really helped me, but books really helped me to be, provided a lot of good shelter, from being bullied on the streets, And they also fired my imagination. So there were places that, I only visited like decades after, but I'd encountered them in books, right? And it's sort of like those things fired my imagination and, taught me to dream about places that I could only dream about. So my sister, Toby, she's found a very favorite, expression of phrase around books will take you everywhere. Right. And I think it's, I agree largely with that sentiment that books will take you everywhere. So whether you are born in, like the most remote part of, say of Nigeria, you could read about places that, and even immerse yourself in the experience of people who live in far-flung places. And then someday, if you dream, those dreams will come true and you could actually visit those places in reality.
There's something I heard, and tell me whether it's true or not, that you used to steal bank books from your teachers back then. Was that true? And was that, I would like to hear that gist. What exactly led you to do that?
Okay. So there was an experience in primary school, so because I was very curious, right? I really would, I think curiosity it's a natural thing, when you're a child, but I guess I was more interested in knowing things outside of my age grade. So I remember there was an experience once where I visited this guy's house, and then I saw in his dad's study, a classmate of mine, a book titled "The Rise and Fall of Idi Amin." And at that point, I was 9 years old. So it's it's a book on history about the famous dictator from Uganda. So clearly there were portions in that book that would even scare you as an adult because they had pictures of some of the gory acts, some of the gory, episodes of military dictatorship in Uganda where people were lined up bare naked and they were shot or, and whatnot. So I don't know. The guy brought it to school. I encouraged him to bring the book to school and I, persuaded him to borrow me the book. And then our teacher found the book and he said, no, you shouldn't be reading a book like this. So the guy took the book. I remember his name, Prince Bola. He took the book to his house. Very lovely teacher. Was, very disciplined man. He would, suffer no fools. So he took the book to his house and then I became friends with the teacher. I would go to his house often after like extramural classes. And then I found the book on his table. I was like, yeah, this is this book that I've been looking to. So I picked up the book and I brought it back. I won't use the word steal. I picked up the book and then that was my first, I would say first, history book that I read of sort of like dictators, and I've read quite a number. I've always been fascinated by military by dictators generally because I often wonder why people would want to stifle the freedoms of other people. So that was an episode in primary school where I don't know where you picked that from. That's not the gist that is quite common. Yeah.
I just found it quite fascinating when I read it. I said I was going to ask you about it. I really wanted to know what exactly led to that.
Yeah.
But when it says a lot about how curious you were as a kid, a 9-year-old wanted to read a book by Idi Amin, I find that quite strange. Because for 9-year-olds, those who are even fascinated about reading, they are into who, like you said, Nancy Drew, Famous Five,
absolutely, Benny Blanton, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what do you think led you on that path? Very young, the 9-year-old, you're already reading what in this age they will call complex materials, complex books.
I guess it was a product of the times that I lived in. My dad was a trade unionist, even though he was a teacher, but he was an active member of the labor union, of the teachers union. And so it was quite political. So my dad would always talk about politics. There were newspapers. So, I became really political, interested in politics at a very young age, and I remember at some point in my life, I thought I was going to end up working as a journalist because most of the people I admired the most were like writers, were journalists. And if you situate it, against the backdrop of the times that we lived in. So the military government of IBB, took a leave, according to him. This he stepped aside, and then there was this brief interregnum where Ernest was the interim head of interim national government, and then we had another was it 5 years or so of Babacha's dictatorship. So if you were just conscious of what happened around you, if you read newspapers, if you read like magazines, you were likely to be very political. And then one other point I missed out was that we didn't have a TV in our house. So after school, the next after you're done with you were done with your own work or your assignments, the next thing would be look for a book to read, right? So I read everything I could find, right? So up till now, the TV series that my peers would talk about that I can't relate because I never watched, we never had TV in our house. There was TV at some point, but it got bad. My parents just couldn't be bothered about fixing it because they were just struggling to put us through school, pay school fees. The last thing on their mind, or put food on the table, the last thing on their mind was, buying the TV in the house. So I read everything I could find, including things that should not even concern a 9-year-old. Yeah.
Do you have a TV yet?
Yes, I do. Yes, I don't watch a lot of TV because, I would say maybe 60% of the time I am at home. I am in my study, right? Mostly working. So TV is downstairs, and I've watched maybe like CNN a few times, but, I'm not a deep TV person. Yeah.
So what would you tell, being someone who as a child was an avid reader, right now you run an establishment that is literally about books. What would you tell parents that are thinking about raising kids, how they can get their kids into books?
Yes, I think the starting point should be, making your home an environment where books are commonplace, right? Or books are available, right? So ubiquitous in your home. So I'm sure you can relate to when we're growing up. Most homes will have like a shelf, right?
Yes.
And the shelf will have like some books. It's a reflection of what has happened to us as a people where, when we're doing our interior decor, we don't even have shelves. When we have shelves, we could have like large TV console now, and you don't even find books there, right? So make it a point of duty to, if you want your books to fall in love with, your kids to fall in love with books, to ensure that books are around them, in their home, in your study, or in their rooms, put a small shelf there, which, the books that they've read, line them up, decently on the shelf. When you want to like celebrate them for doing something that that you're proud of, you've bought them, a nice pair of shoes. Also make sure that you include books. Read to them, because I think that, when you read to kids, they get fascinated by stories and they want to, they obviously want to, hear more. Again, that goes to the point around starting really young, right? So even when they're babies, get them bought books, make sure that the period of them developing their sense of touch, books are a essential part of those things, and books that can help them really with developing the keen sense of touch. So on milestones, make sure that you buy them books so that they can have those stories to remember those years by. And I think the other thing, because kids are the creatures of examples, right? So you also have to read, right? So if they don't see you reading, if half of the time they're always seeing you like, nothing and pressing your phone, then they probably also will be glued to their screen. So when you read, the odds are high that they would also be drawn to books.
Okay, that's it. One thing you said now that actually resonates very strongly is that at least people can read. Don't just stay on your phone all the time. When you see that, like you said, they're curious.
Yes.
They now want to know what you're finding interesting on the phone as well, and that's what they want to get used to.
Absolutely.
I'm going to make it simple now. You studied microbiology.
Yeah.
We went into policy. Then you ended up with selling books. Can you explain? It looks like a maze that I'm trying to wrap my head around. Help make sense to me. How did it work for that? Was it planned?
No.
Or was it unplanned? didn't lead to where you are today?
Okay. So, when I was a teenager, the people, like I said, that I admired really well were writers, right? And this thing where you're in high school, in secondary school, where they'd say because you're doing very well in sciences, you should go and, you should go to a science class. And for those who are not familiar with the educational system in Nigeria, so in junior high school, you take all your general subjects, and then when you're done 3 years of junior secondary school, you would proceed to do senior years for another 3 years. So, and then there are 3 sections, right? You could go to a science class, or an art class, or a commercial class. So I ended up going to a science class. And because I was, predictably, I was doing really well in class, like, oh, yeah, I think you should study medicine. And I was like, oh, yeah, I should, try and do medicine. So I wrote my JAM, and I was fit to have it. I didn't get, high enough scores to get into a program in medicine. So I then had to settle for microbiology, which was what I, studied. Of course, you would get into the first year hoping that, you do very well and you'll be able to like cross over to the College of Health Sciences. But surprisingly that year, we weren't allowed to like cross over. And so I ended up staying, studying, microbiology. I realized midway into the course that I wasn't cut out for it. Most of my interests in the art started to emerge by my second year. So I became a member of the Association of Campus Journalists. I was writing, I edited the Megaphone, which was like the flagship, campus press then. And then, by my third year, I'd written a number of recruitment tests, and I literally had like an offer with interview slots, or interview series of interviews waiting for me to at KPMG. So during my youth service, I finished my interviews, and 2 weeks after youth service ended, I went over to work for KPMG, in their risk management division. So I was at KPMG for about 5 years, doing mostly like enterprise risk management. And then my senior years, I then moved to working on engagements relating to financial risk for clients in the financial services industry. So one bit that I missed was that I stayed an extra year in school. Most people don't know this. I didn't finish with my peers. For some health reasons, I had to take a leave of absence. So I didn't finish with my peers, and, in between being depressed about like my life, like, oh, my mates are already like serving, I'm at home. And then if you studied in Ife, those years were really turbulent, right? We're always having like disruptions to our academic program. So of course I found solace in books, and then I attended a book reading. The book reading was at the Terra Culture in Victoria Island. I think that year should be 2007. And then there were 2 authors who were reading, and then walked up to them and said, hey, I think I would like to help you sell your books to students. And it's like, okay, what campus? I told them, Ife, and they said, okay, yeah, sure. And they said, I would not only sell, I would also help you organize a book reading, because I think that this would be something that students will find exciting. So you could come read your books and they could ask you. And they accepted. They were really excited about the prospect of reading to Ife. So myself and my friends organized the reading in OAU. So we brought the 2 authors, El Nukoya. He had a day job as a management consultant, but by night he was a writer. And then there was the other writer, Judibia, as well. So they read the book, and that was my first experience in book selling. So after, just before the reading, we sold, copies of the books to students, and then we pulled off that reading. I still remember vividly in one of the lecture theaters was where we had the reading. So, I was just thinking about, so now, there are books, but there are very few bookstores. How do you ensure that, you're able to get books into the hands of people who are, really, really interested in books? And so when I started my job at KPMG, I sort of, started a side gig helping self-published authors distribute their books. So that was the first iteration of Roving Heights. And so from my salary as a consultant, I would save about 30,000 naira and pay someone else to help, self-published authors to distribute their books. And then I also had another side hustle with a friend of mine, Temitayo Olofilowa. We had a book club. in Lagos called Pop Faction Book Club. And every last Saturday of every month at the bookstore in Yaba called Debonaire's bookstore was also founded by an ex-KPMG consultant, Mr. Debola, can't remember his surname now. Lovely bookstore on Habamacaulay Way, the building where you have CC Hub. That was where the bookstore, on the ground floor of that building. That's where the bookstore was then. So every last Saturday of every month, would have book readings there, so we're able to form a strong literary community that helped us engage with a lot of authors. By my senior years, I got really busy, and then the side hustle was then starting to suffer. The bookstores weren't paying us, so I had one of the rooms in my flat, books were just dumped there. I was tired and my work was equally very demanding. So I at some points I just became really weary about, management consulting. I wanted to do something with a little bit of real world impact. So I signed up for a fellowship with a fund called Acumen. They used to have a global fellows program then. And I was very lucky that year to be selected in, I think should be maybe the 5th or 6th cohort. So I quit my job and then, signed up for the fellowship, went to New York for 3 months and then went to Tanzania where I worked for a renewable energy company, called Husk. Today they are one of the biggest mini grid companies in the world. I was their second staff in Tanzania. Did that for 3 years, helping with business development for the company, helping them expand their footprint in Tanzania, Uganda, and Ghana. And whilst on the job, there were lots of conversations with folks in government. There were lots of conversations with folks in development. And then the word that we always talk about was market failure, things like, government intervening through subsidies and the likes. And I was just really, really interested in exploring those subjects a little further. At some point I was tempted to do an MBA, and I said, okay, maybe the way to go would be, to do a public policy, program. And as fate will have it, there was one of my friends from Ife who had done a program at Oxford at the Blavatsky School. I think it was in the first cohort. I had a conversation with him about what the experience was like, and he heartily recommended the MPP program at Oxford, and that's how I applied. And I used to say I was very lucky that year. They wanted a Nigerian in the cohort, and I guess I was probably the only Nigerian that applied, so I got a place. And then that's how I studied public policy. But in the course of my travel, US, Tanzania and every other places that my work took me to, I'd always explore the bookstore scene in those places. And, my sister had just finished a program at English language, a degree in English language. And then she said, oh, I'm back at home and I see there's a room full of books. Is there something I can do with, and I said, yeah, go for it. Knock yourself. So she then, resumed what I'd, practically put on hold because of my travels. So microbiology was, I studied it by sheer serendipity. I wanted to become a doctor. That didn't happen. And then, working in management consulting, was just also, an act of fate, studied microbiology, ended up working in the financial services, and then my journey to working in the renewable energy space, and then going to study public policy because of my interest in, things like, how do you ensure that market failures around, generally various sectors, electricity, food, education, how do you use tools of policy to address them?
So this started as a side also for you, but at some point it became a real deal. So at what point did you say, look, this has to transition from the side also?
So when I was away for about 4 years, so 3 years mostly in East Africa, and then 1 year in the UK for graduate studies, and then I decided in 2017 to move back home. So I was at some point I was really tired of just living out of my suitcases, and then living in furnished apartment and just knowing that I'm here temporarily and I'll be on the road again. And then at that point we started a family, myself and my wife. So my son was 9 months when I moved to the UK for my graduate program. So when I moved back at that point, my sister had started the second iteration of Roving Heights. So she then started to explore using social media, Instagram, Twitter to, just get, people to be aware of the titles that we're carrying, the books that we're carrying, we had in stock as at then. And because I had experienced like the book scene in other markets, in the UK, in the US, even in East Africa, I said, look, this is definitely like the direction to go. This, I remember telling her, this can no longer be a dining room affair, because until then it was just a business that we're running out of our dining room. So I told her, you know what, let's incorporate it. You take some shares. My wife was also really interested in the business, we said, look, you would help us handle like our accounting and our finance and also on the operational side of things. So, Bola also became a shareholder in the business and a co-founder. And then so it became, the three of us. So we incorporated it in 2016. I was back home in 2017. And, after my internship, we decided that, look, we need to get our first, physical office. It was a very small one when we moved from our dining room. I remember where the spot where, the shared office that we first took. And for some good reasons, the brand had taken on an image that was bigger than what the big business was as at then. And people would say, oh, I want to come to your office. I'm like, no, you can't come to our office because it's it was a very small, tiny thing, and the ones who were persistent, who would say, oh, I'm coming to your office, they will come in and you will see the disappointment on their faces, to say oh, I thought it was really, really big. I'm like, no, we're getting there. Don't worry. So at that point, Toby was really good, on the marketing side, and she's still very, very good on that particular bit of work. On the social media, side of our work, she was killing it. And at that point, I was looking at ways for us to increase the range of books that we carried, also on trying to also raise some funding for our business. As well, Bola was looking at the people angle and also tidying up our accounts and as well. So 2018, as fate will have it, a friend of mine was moving out of his office on Ogunlano Drive. And I said, hey, Musti, can you talk to your landlord? I think that we would like to take over this space and make it like our first physical store. And graciously made the referral to me for us. And then that became our first physical outlet. And I remember what that space was looking like when we moved there. We had just 2 shelves and I could count the number of books we brought into that space when we moved there. But we're not deterred. We were very lucky to have some really good people in those early years. One of them joined us as an intern, was really very good with graphics, and then also with social media was a Twitter guru, the guy Olumide then at that time. So that became Ogunlano Drive was our first physical store. I also had I would say it was a full-time job where I was helping, on some energy access program that the UK charity was setting up in Nigeria. So that took me to Abuja. So I moved to Abuja in the year 2018. And then, got a flat. So it became, the bookstore thing was also was a side also then, by 2018 was still a side also. And then my flat also doubled as sort of like a store also. So, we had, dispatch traders would come in to pick up books and then deliver to customers. That also helped them reduce, some of our customers reduce their delivery costs because we would just pick up the books from the park, take them to my house and then arrange them and have the books delivered and in 2019, I remember we would go for weekends, we'd go for pop-up events, we put the books in our trunk and then, set up a table. And I still have pictures of those years and I was like, oh wow, there's just the deep passion that was just powering us all through. 2019, we found a space that became our second store in Wuse, Wuse to our second store and our first store in Abuja. I remember in March of 2019 when we opened that store, I still went through the pictures of those of the opening day, of the launch day, I beg your pardon, I could count the number of books on the shelf. And I was telling somebody that by the time we had a small party and by the time the party was over, we had sold about 720,000 naira worth of books, which was about, it was about $2,000, and it was like, wow, this is major, this is huge. And I remember telling my two co-founders, Bola, my wife, and Toby, my sister, that we need to go to the London Book Fair and get credit, and because until then we had only traded on the pro forma basis, meaning that, you request a pro forma invoice for books that are published abroad, and then they would, the publisher has to send you the pro forma, you go to your bank, the bank would make the payment on your behalf. It would take maybe a week at the least for them to come receive payments, and then they will ship the books to your freight forwarder. So, your biggest limitation would be your capital, the amount of money you could trade with, versus getting credit lines where, okay, we open a credit line for you for like £40,000. You will trade within the limit of the credit lines that you have, and then you could do more, right? And, just turn around will be a lot faster. So I remember going to the London Book Fair of March that year, March 2019. And I was talking to this, this publisher to say, hey, we're really doing really well. We started really small. I remember you bringing out my phone and showing them the number of followers we had on Instagram to say, look, we have lots of followers on Instagram. And I guess, 2019 social media wasn't really big, particularly for books, versus now where if you're attending a book fair, international book fair, the publishers will now show you the books that are really doing well on TikTok, for instance. They'll say, hey, these books are really doing well on TikTok. Then there was no TikTok. Instagram wasn't as huge as it is now. We're like, look, we have 15,000 followers on Instagram. This is big. People are sending us messages on DM. So it was the biggest picture of my life, right? Telling them you need to give us, open credit lines for us so that we could do more business. And then I wasn't sure whether they were convinced. They had these poker faces, and I wasn't sure whether they were buying my story. And one said, okay, what if we give you £500? And I said, yeah, let's start small, £500. You'll see what we'll do. And because if you're going to access, credit, you will need references, right? So it's okay. So who can provide you reference around, provide you a reference, I beg your pardon, around your credit worthiness. So that year, I remember, Penguin started with us, Ashet followed, then Bloomsbury, Macmillan, and then we started to grow, the range of books that we're carrying. We were able to do more, and it was just on the up from there.
Across all your stores, how many books do you say you hold per time now?
It's hard to put a number to it, but I think that we should be about 80,000 titles now. I always check, our inventory keeps growing, it keeps growing, both foreign and also books that are published locally. And the good thing is that there's also a renaissance of some sort in the publishing industry in Nigeria. So you have more independent publishers who are also churning out books. You've got the likes of Narrative Landscape Press, you've got Masobe, you've got Wida Books, you've got Parisia, you've got Knowledge in Ibadan, Bookcraft, they've been in the market for years. So yeah, the output is growing, by leaps and bounds in terms of just the literary output, but there are also loads of self-published effort, right? Every week we get at least, I'm not exaggerating, we get at least 10 people 10 or self-published authors who are reaching out to say, hey, I've just published a book. I'd like you to carry the book. So that's, and we're very passionate about supporting the local, literary ecosystem, so that's something that is very, very important for us, because of our own stories. So if you go to our bookstores, you realize that the longest rule of books that we have is devoted to fiction, and most of the fiction that we carry most of the fiction we carry is Nigerian or African fiction. On politics and history as well, there are a lot of books that are coming out, memoirs. I was just talking to you before we started to chat about business books as well, because we need to tell our own stories, right? Whether they are business stories, stories of entrepreneurial successes, they need to be told. The realities of doing business in Nigeria is different from doing business in the West. And if we want to celebrate our own stories, then, it then means that we need to, give them as much visibility as possible.
What is the business model around selling books? And out of that, I also want you to explain to your school, which partly includes myself as well. What does that involve? What does the book industry look like? While we're talking, you talked about self-published authors. You talked about life of market. And you said so many things that people are trying to wrap their heads around. What exactly does this industry look like? How to write a book? What am I navigating? So take us into the world and the business of selling books.
Okay, so if I want to start, I think the starting point in the value chain would be, so someone has an idea, thinks he's got a great story. That's the author, the person who puts pen to paper. And in developed markets, what you typically have is that you have a manuscript. The first person you pitch your manuscript to would be an agent. You want to get an agent. So the agent is the guy who helps you shop around for like the best deals. So, so you get an agent first. The agent would, read your manuscript and say, oh, this is nice. We'll take a bet on it. And then start pitching, the manuscript to publishing houses. That's what you have in more developed markets. At home, or let's bring it closer home, what you typically find is that, someone has a manuscript, he will shop it around because we don't have agents in our, we don't have agents in our, Detroit ecosystem currently. So you're shopping it around to a publisher. So that's in what you typically have traditionally, like in the traditional sense of the book trade. And the publisher says, oh, I love this. The publisher could offer you an advance, to say, okay, I'm giving you an advance, say maybe, 5 million naira. You sign a publishing deal and then you get an advance. And then, the book is edited, it's, a lot of work is done to make it, ready to be really sold. You could get some blobs, when you have maybe a dummy version, send a few advanced copies to other published authors who can write blobs and give you, say endorse the book. And, when it's ready, they put out the word to booksellers like us to say, this book is coming out in 2 months. We think it's going to do well. This is the marketing budget that we have for it. We're going to get the author on XYZ number of shows. His or our previous work sold 20,000 copies. So, you need to, place a lot of order because we think it's going to do well. So that's what you have for like the traditional, route of getting published. In some cases, now for those authors, what you typically get is they get to be paid royalties, maybe percentage of like every copy sold. And, the way it works is that you need to earn back your advance. So you've been paid like a 5 million naira advance, for illustrative purposes. You would need to sell, earn back that 5 million before you start earning royalties. So what that means is that if you paid, let's say, 10%, the book is going to be sold for 10,000 naira and you've agreed that you earn, 10% of that book. So it means that, you probably will need to sell, my math is right, 5,000 copies, right? Yeah. Yeah. Before you start to earn. So anything in excess of 5,000 copies starts when you start to earn, royalties on the book. And then, yeah. Now, if you don't have the traditional contract with the publisher, what you would have is an arrangement where you say, I want to just self-publish my book. I've written it, given it to an editor. The editor gets a designer to work on the book cover. And then, the book is ready. I will do all the hard work of promoting it and then dealing with all the bookstores. Now, the author who's gone through the traditional route has no interface with bookstores at all. The publishers will be the ones interfacing with the bookstores, right? So typically in more developed markets, you would have a distributor the publisher would set discount terms or commercial terms to say, okay, this book should be sold to bookstores at a particular discount. So if the book is, say, 10,000 naira, it would say, okay, I've set the discounts to bookstores at, X number of percent. So you're going to buy the books at a discounted price, and you could either buy the books outright, or you could either outrightly buy the book, or you could get it on credit, based on the credit terms that the distributor has established for you. Yes, but if you've gone the self-published route, you will be interfacing directly with, the booksellers, or a distributor. So you would say, okay, this is my book. The bookstore will say, okay, I will take this book from you on credit. For every copy I sell, I get a commission. So it could be 20%, could be 20, 25, could be 30, depending on like the commercial arrangements. And then, every month you ask for like a sales report. They remit what they've been sold. If they're low on copies, you get to restock. The difference is that if you go through the self-published route, you will need to do a lot of work for your books to do well, because you need to like market it. You need to, whatever you're doing, chase up like collection, and bookstores Nigerian bookstores are very tough, right? When it comes to like getting your money back. Sorry. And that's one lesson we've learned in the first iteration of Roving Heights. And it's something that we pride ourselves on, to saying that like, we're very creditworthy. When we sell books, we remit it back to if you request for your sales reports, we give it to you. And we're actually working on a platform where you could see your sales reports in real time, so you don't have to send us emails. We've also, realized that, book selling has to be an experiential, has to be experiential. People want to come into a store and make it an experience, or they want it to be like a really cozy place. They also want it to be an avenue where they can interact with other book lovers or even engage with the authors. So we host readings, we host book signings, we host book club events, we do book swaps. So we generally try to curate like, lots of experiences for our customers, just to ensure that they're well engaged. We do, people have come to our stores to propose to their partners, because they think like, my girlfriend loves books, or my boyfriend likes books, and they can't think of any other place, to ask their loved ones to marry them, except a bookstore. So we've also realized that, you need to go beyond just, selling, being a place where people buy books, making sure that you're curating the right experiences for your customers. And that's something that we take really serious.
If you look at the Nigerian market today, do you think the market is large enough to have 10, 20, 30 Rovenites?
So, I think that Nigeria can support a 30-store chain, bookstore, but I don't think we can do that right now. Our disposable income, our economy needs to grow. We need to address, challenges around inequality, so that you don't necessarily have to be a solidly middle class person to say you're book shopping. As an undergrad, a little less than 2 decades ago, I could still go to the university bookstore and buy books, and I'm not talking about like, I'm not that old, right? You could, out of your pocket money, still buy maybe a book or 2 a month. I don't think as an undergrad you can do that now, except your parents are like rich, or they're fairly middle class.
Yeah. And in terms of the supply chain, so what are the challenges you face? I mean, selling books, both in inflow and the outflow, are there difficulties you face managing that supply chain aspect of the business?
Yes. So, for inbound logistics, sometimes with sourcing, yes, we have accounts with a number of like publishers, in the UK, in the US, but if there are, their books are in demand that you don't have the accounts. Sometimes it might require you having to spend some time, being set up, building relationships. Some of them would say, no, you have to trade with me on cash basis before I open a credit account for you because you're new. So that's on one hand. Then the other critical order will be around, just, shipping things to the country, from the UK, it shouldn't be more than 4 weeks, but sometimes, getting a ship that is, calling in at the port in Lagos might be really tough. So that's then clearing at the port, that's another hurdle. So we could, some 2 to 3 weeks. And then, even though books are supposed to be duty free, but sometimes there are hassles, or, during those processes. So then I think the other challenges are around with warehousing, as your footprint increases, then you have to then worry about the whole supply chain of moving things from one place to the other. And because we are still growing, we're still trying to learn. Okay, so you send something to Kaduna, but it's not doing well in Kaduna. You need to recall it back to Lagos. So it's then building and learning, ensuring that you're using the data that you're getting to be able to accurately forecast, where you think what will do well so that you don't have to recall things back to places where they're doing better. There's also that challenge with people, getting, good people. There aren't too many bookstores in Nigeria to begin with. So if you're looking to hire people, so it means that you have to train them yourself. First, you have to ensure that there are people who read because you need to love books to want to work in a bookstore. And that's not to say there are people who don't like to read, who are not great people, who cannot work. But I found out that the people that I enjoy working the most, people who've tried the most in our business are people who are book lovers. So you also have that. And then the whole hassle around doing business in Nigeria. You send something from Lagos, it's supposed to get to Abuja, and then it's held by NDLEA because the company that you used for logistic is also carrying maybe some contraband stuff, and then your cargo is delayed for another 1 or 2 weeks, because before your items are released, or there's an accident, or there's some, you have all sorts of things to, dealing with various vendors, or dealing with third party delivery companies like DHL or K Express. They sometimes will also outsource your delivery to someone else, and then the last mile aspect of it then becomes really difficult. Your customers are irate, they haven't gotten their books, and then you're sending emails back and forth, so those are some of the challenges with logistics. And whilst we're learning what works, what isn't working, I think that they are likely to become even more complex as our footprint grows, right? So for delivery, we've had to sort of define maybe 3-4 delivery partners, and then make those options available to customers. So you want to use DHL, it's more expensive, get to 2-3 days. You want to use this is how much it costs, But then one other point I need to make is that we're also mindful of where we expand to, so that we're bringing those things closer to customers. They won't have to pay delivery costs. So if your book is in Kaduna and you're in Zaria, the cost of course it's pretty low. Or you could say, okay, yeah, Kaduna to Zaria is 45 minutes. Okay, when next I'm in town, I'll just stop by the store and pick up. Which for us is very good, because it means that if you walk into the store, you're likely to see other things that you like, then you buy. Yeah.
Correct. If you apply the 80-20 principle, if a self-published author comes to you and says, I know there are 1,000 things I can do to support growth of my book with the sales, what are the top 3 things you tell the person to focus solely on?
Okay, don't do a book launch. I think it's a waste of time. Yeah, so one of the things I've seen with authors is they spend so much money on a book launch. Yeah.
Sorry, but that was very interesting, because the first thing we hear everybody say is
don't do a book launch. Don't do a book launch. That's a waste of money. So I've seen authors who will spend 40 million to launch a book. They're throwing parties. They cook food for everybody. Don't do that, right? In fact, right, channel that money into getting a good, maybe PR firm or a good, to help you manage you know, promoting the book, manage the promotion of your book, right? And they don't necessarily have to be big firms. There are small firms that have developed competencies in working with authors. I would say that's the first thing, because, and for us, we always ask when we're onboarding authors, say, do you have a marketing budget? Because we realize that the books that tend to do well are the books that there's some budget that is committed to like promoting the book. If you don't promote, it's like every product that you have. If you don't get people excited about it, they won't ask for it. And, trust me, you're competing as a self-published author with several established authors in that particular genre, So if you're reading a work of fiction, people are likely to walk into a bookstore looking for a book by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie than Dotun Eyinade, who's a first time, is a debut author who's written a work of fiction. But if you have a budget and you've come up with like a very, peculiar standout marketing campaign, maybe take a billboard post in some good spot, you'll be surprised at how much you can spend. So you have 20 million for a book launch. You could take a, vantage spot for a 1.5 million, where it's there for a month, something that is grabbing attention grabbing, and, or you could do like sponsored posts, do something different, get a big influencer to endorse the book. We've seen those things work, especially if they are done consistently. So I would say, promotion, right? Be the biggest evangelist of your book, right? And do it consistently. I've seen people, there's a friend of mine who told me of a lady who wrote a book. It's quite risky, something on sex, right? And then of course Nigerians are always very close about the topic like that. And what she would do is she got an influencer who's like one of these twerkers, to every time she would just pay the person maybe 200k to say, please, when you're twerking, make sure that my book is right behind you whilst you're twerking. And then 500, 1,000 copies get sold because of that. Like people are just like, I want this book, I want this book, I want this book, I want this book. And then when she runs out, she will do another print run, and then she will get, hey, please come and do your magic again. And then, so I would say, the sales that you're looking for, the pathway to achieving those numbers is just, a consistent and a very deliberate, approach at promoting the book, right? Except you've built a following for yourself. So let's say you've built like, you have 100,000 followers on Instagram. Those are your primary constituents they will buy. But if you're not well known, then it means that you need to devote a lot of attention to like promoting the books. So when you get invited to speak, take your book along, make sure you're constantly making allusions to the book, get your friends who are well known to endorse it, tell them, to make allusions to the book, and, do events where, you're going, you're doing a book signing where people come into the store and get their copies sold. And you might even show up and say, okay, do a pop-up event, maybe in a big mall, set up like, rent a space for like for a day. I've seen some very lovely designs where when people walk past, they're just going to be interested to say like, oh, what's going on here? And so, my so and so, I'm also of this book, and then, a copy is available for so and so. If you do that consistently, more people will be excited. And if it's really, really good, it would speak for itself. But of course, the pathway to achieving those numbers is promotion. So that's what I would recommend people to. Yeah.
Very creative ideas. Would you say there is a typical budget, so much work for marketing?
I mean, it could range from, so give you an example. I was telling someone, it was like 2 years ago to say, do you know that with 400,000 naira, you will get a billboard ad? Right? Yeah. And depending on, in places like, there are some states that it could even be cheaper than that. Right? There are periods where if you negotiate very well, they would say, okay, this spot's been down for like, for like 3 months. Nobody's been there, use this stuff. So it could range from 50,000 naira to say, okay, I want to do a sponsored post, and videos for me actually even do better. Do a video where you're talking about the book. This is why I've written this particular stuff in a way that grabs the attention of people that, and they want to listen. So that's key. You could do, for in-store walk-ins, you could do like a point of sale materials where, when people walk in, they see and like, oh, consistently, it's okay, this is what this book is about, because you've done like maybe like a book standee, for instance, that, would show, oh, this is what this book is about, this is why you should get it. You could run an ad on TV, or get on a TV program where you also talk about it. So I think the budget range could start from 50,000 naira. And there's people are surprised that, there's a lot that you could do with that amount on social media. So look at the people you're trying to target. What are they likely to, what are their interests? What time of the day are they likely to be on social media? Where do they stay, what part of town? And then, do a targeted ad, and then look at the analytics. Is it converting? Is it not? Tweak it again. Talk to a social media practitioner so that they can help you achieve the kind of results that you're looking for. Yeah. But, I think promotion is really, really key.
Let me begin to tie things up, a little bit. How many people do you hire, at Rovenites?
How many people do we hire?
Yeah,
staff strength is about, I think we're close to 50 now across all the stores. Yeah, across all the stores. Yeah, we're close to 50 full time. Yeah.
So what's your leadership style like?
Good question. So one of the things that I like to admit is that I'm always very open to feedback, and the more critical, the better. And I always like to provide those feedback to the people I work with. And for me, it's even an issue where you don't provide feedback as a manager, right? So everyone I've worked with, I always like to give them feedback and say, hey, this is not going well. This is an area in which I think you can improve. And I always request for that as well. So for instance, people say doing an exit interview is like ticking the boxes. For me, I make it a point of duty to read all the exit interview notes and to see what people say about like my style, like, and I remember one episode where somebody said, provided really very, very critical feedback about like, oh, I could do this better. And I had to go back to ask the HR manager to say, please, do you have any context to what this person said? And then, I was really bothered about it, because I thought he reflected poorly on me. But when I pulled back and interrogated, I realized that the issue wasn't mine, but it was sort of like this whole generational thing where, I think that people are becoming really sensitive to honest feedback. So the person said, I told the person that our output was underwhelming. To say like, I expected so much, but like what you gave me was underwhelming. And then the person was, very, said that I lack empathy because I told her that our work was underwhelming. I was like, I don't understand. Like, there's no way I can put it. Like, if it's underwhelming, it's underwhelming. Like, I'm sorry, but I have to be very truthful. So that was one episode that I was like, oh wow. But I always make it a point of duty to, listen to what people tell me. If you come to me and say, hey, you guys, dropped the ball or you messed up, I would apologize. I'll reflect about it. And then I would, constantly, make effort to be better. And I would say that I have grown as a manager and as a leader. I'm not where I was like some years ago. I'm thankful for everyone who's, helped me on my own journey. And it's the reason today why I spend a lot of time reading memoirs, because I want to learn from other people. And sometimes when I see it, like, oh wow, they did that. Like, no, I don't ever want to be like this person, even though this person's a billionaire. I don't want to ever, treat people like this. I don't want to treat my customers like this. I want to, So, it's a journey for me, and I'm being very deliberate and intentional about how I navigate that journey. Yeah.
Thanks for that. If a young entrepreneur comes to you today and asks for an advice on what they need to do in the Nigerian environment to build a business successfully, what would be your advice?
I would say there will be a litany of ideas. I would say start in an area that you're really, really interested in, like really passionate about, because passion is really, really important, especially if you're running a business in a tough environment like Nigeria. If it's a space that you're not passionate about, the odds are high that when they go in to get stuff, you would, you run out. really quickly. So if it's a space that you're passionate about, that even if you don't get paid, you'll still be in that space, then I think that you're likely to, so I mean, books for me have always been like a lifelong passion, right? And I remember when I was starting out, I would tell people, even if I don't sell them, I have friends that will give them out to. Yeah. Like I will dash my friends if they don't buy them. I have friends that will give them out to. But yeah. So make sure you're starting out in something that you really love. And because you love it, you love that industry, you love that space, you can devote hours like learning about it. You're not going to get bored, right? You're going to become like an expert. You know so much about it, down to like the most granular details. Yeah. So number two, learn as much as you can about that sector. And of course, that's going to be a lifelong thing. So for me, if I travel anywhere, I go to bookstores, I take pictures, I talk to booksellers, I read books about people who've set up bookstores. I've read about Tim Waterstones. I just even, I continue to read about like famous booksellers. I look for opportunities to meet them. I met this lovely, Egyptian bookseller at an event in Sharjah like some years ago. I went ahead to read a book. I've watched like tons of her videos, just so that I can learn and become better, because, there's no official primer on how to become, a bookseller. So again, anybody who's trying to do business in Nigeria, read as much about people who've navigated, businesses in Nigeria. If you can have an opportunity to be mentored by one, lucky you, but if you can't be mentored by any, listen to videos, listen to podcasts like Diary of an African Entrepreneur. There are tons of things that you can learn. So when people say, financing the challenge, yes, it's a big challenge in Nigeria, but there are lots of workarounds. I talked about how we were able to get like credit lines, and which sort of helped our business to scale. Otherwise, I would either have had to raise money from other investors, but for now, it's still, we haven't done any raise. We've just, plowed back like whatever we made back into the business, and also dependent on credit lines and loans. So that's something that I would say. Listen to your customers, because, when they praise you, it's good. But when they give you critical feedback, you should even listen to those the more. When people say, hey, you guys suck at this, yes, it's painful, but, especially if it's the last thing you read before going to bed, but you're likely to benefit from those kind of feedback, from those kind of reviews, than the ones when they're giving you 5-star rating. So that's very, very important. Then also, look at trends, because today this could be selling, but then because the market is shifting, things are no longer going in that direction. Stay nimble. That's also very, very important, so that you can easily pivot to other things if the particular business model that you're working on is not working. So one of the things I see is a lot of people get bogged down because they've raised lots of money beyond what they can actually use, and then they then become like really lazy. We've gone through the route of like really bootstrapping, right? Our way. I think I can think of our journey from when I know how much money I can pay staff, to now where I feel like, okay, well, if it's good, yeah, I think we can hire the person. If you think the person can, or of not drawing a salary at all from the business, to the point where you can say, okay, I can afford to pay myself this, so I think it's really, really important to really stay nimble, even if you've, raised money, but you also want to ensure that you're getting value for money. Act as if you don't have money in the bank, and then strive quickly for a point where you feel like your business can get to a point where, whatever cash flow you're making, whatever revenues you're making, can at least cover a significant portion of your operation. Yeah.
That's fine. Brilliant. I'm going to do a very quick lightning round. Just one answer from you for each of those questions I'm going to ask. Just one response. What is your favorite book that you've read ever?
It's tough. I read a lot of like really favorite books. Yeah. Okay. I would say Gulag Archipelago, by Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
My next question, what's your best genre?
Memoirs and biographies.
One Nigerian author everyone must read before they die.
Chinua Achebe. I think everyone should read Chinua Achebe.
What's the weirdest thing a customer has ever asked for in your store?
Yeah, I mean, like, so people would come and ask if you have sell like maybe like adult books or like, no, that would be the weirdest. So there's somebody who asked me recently to help him order like 6 and 7 books of Moses. Have you ever heard of those books?
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
Like, you want to read that?
Yes.
Yeah, and because I'm quite close to the customer. Like, why are you reading a book like that? Like, well, that it's actually read it before, and he was like seeing some strange things, and he wants to read it again and gives it to someone. Like, okay, no problem. I hear you. Yeah, so that's probably like the weirdest I've seen. People that have come to ask for like, oh, do you sell like adult books, like there are smutty? Yeah, but I think the 6 and 7 books of Moses would be the weirdest one. Yeah.
If you were not doing this, what would you be doing?
Good question. Maybe selling shoes. I love shoes. I love shoes. Yeah, I love shoes. Yeah.
And that's selling thing. So you'll be selling something.
Yeah, I'll probably be selling shoes, or maybe working as a, even though I find management consulting boring, like, maybe still working as a management consultant. Yeah. Management consultant. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Doc. So I think that was the last question. No, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Deji. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.